Marcus Thorne stared at the message on his tablet, rereading the unusual assignment for the third time. As one of Celestial Companion's most sought-after escorts, he'd become accustomed to unusual requests from wealthy clients, but this was different. A non-human client? He asked, looking up at Dominique, the agency's managing director. Her office overlooked the gleaming skyline of New Chicago, the afternoon sun reflecting off the glass and steel towers that had risen from the ashes of the old city after first contact. A diplomat from the Vexillian Confederation, she confirmed, sliding a security badge across her desk. This isn't just another job, Marcus. The diplomatic corps specifically requested someone with your particular skill set. And what skill set would that be? He asked, his voice carefully neutral as he examined the badge. It bore the intertwined symbols of Earth and the Alien Alliance, along with security clearances he'd never seen before. Your background in xenolinguistics before you joined us, your adaptability, and your discretion. Dominique smiled thinly. Plus, you're one of the few who hasn't expressed revulsion at the idea of close proximity to non-humans. Marcus shrugged. Hard to be xenophobic when half your neighborhood growing up was settlement housing for refugee Arcanians. Precisely. This client is important, their species rarely sends representatives to Earth, and this one is apparently here for sensitive negotiations. They've requested human companionship to better understand our culture. Companionship as in. That's for you and the client to determine, Dominique said. The diplomatic corps was vague, but emphasized respect and cultural exchange over other services. You'll be compensated for 2 weeks regardless of what transpires. The sum that appeared on his tablet made Marcus's eyebrows rise. It was enough to clear his student debts and put a down payment on actual property outside the megacity. When do I start? Tonight. A transport will collect you at 1900 hours. Pack for 2 weeks. The location is the diplomatic compound in Lake Forest. 6 hours later, Marcus found himself passing through the third security checkpoint at a sprawling lakeside estate. Human and alien guards worked in tandem, scanning him with technology that made his skin tingle. A tall, silver-skinned being with elongated limbs approached. You are Marcus Thorne, it stated rather than asked, its voice produced by a translation device at its throat. I am Administrative Attaché Krell. Follow me. They walked through corridors of polished stone inlaid with what looked like circuitry, glowing faintly beneath the surface. The compound was a strange blend of Earth architecture and alien aesthetics, familiar shapes rendered in unfamiliar materials. You will attend to Ambassador Vexia, Krell explained. She has been studying humanity for decades but has limited direct experience with your kind. Your role is to provide cultural context, companionship, and to answer questions about human behavior and customs. I understand, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he did. You will not ask about diplomatic matters. You will not enter restricted areas. You will not discuss what you observe here with outsiders. Krell stopped before an ornate door that seemed to be made of some kind of coral-like material. Are these terms clear? Crystal. Ambassador Vexia has adopted some human mannerisms to facilitate interaction, but do not expect her to behave as a human would. With that cryptic warning, Krell pressed a pattern into the door, which dissolved rather than opened. The room beyond was spacious and curved, with a view of Lake Michigan through what appeared to be a force field rather than glass. The temperature was warmer than the rest of the compound, the air slightly more humid. And there she was. Ambassador Vexia wasn't what Marcus had expected. While clearly not human, she wasn't so alien as to be incomprehensible. Tall and willowy, with skin that shifted between deep blue and purple like the surface of a soap bubble, she had 4 arms instead of 2, and her face featured large, multifaceted eyes that reminded him of a dragonfly's. Marcus Thorne, she said, her voice melodic and accented but understandable without translation technology. I appreciate your willingness to assist me in understanding your species better. She made a gesture with her lower right hand that he took to be a greeting. Marcus bowed slightly. "The pleasure is mine, Ambassador. Please, call me Vexia. We will be spending considerable time together, and I find human formality restrictive." As Marcus settled in for his first evening with the alien diplomat, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to this assignment than cultural exchange. The way the security personnel had examined him, the restricted areas Krell had mentioned, the sheer importance placed on his discretion, something deeper was happening here. But that, he decided as Vexia began asking him about human concepts of personal space, was a mystery for tomorrow. 5 days into his assignment, Marcus found himself growing increasingly comfortable in Vexia's presence. Their conversations had evolved from formal cultural exchanges to something resembling genuine friendship. Each evening, they would sit in her private gardens overlooking the lake, where the atmospheric regulators created a microclimate suited to both human and Vexilian physiology. "You seem distracted tonight," Vexia observed, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the sunset in kaleidoscopic patterns. She reclined on a curved lounger designed for her four-armed form, 2 arms holding a tablet displaying Earth literature, the others gesturing expressively as she spoke. "Just thinking about something you said yesterday," Marcus replied, watching as the colors beneath her skin shifted from deep azure to a troubled violet. He'd learned to read her chromatic emotional responses. Violet meant concern or discomfort. "About your species' concept of intimacy." Vexia's skin rippled with pale green flecks, amusement. "Does it disturb you?" "Not disturb. Intrigue." Marcus chose his words carefully. "The idea that your people form bonds through shared vulnerability rather than physical contact is fascinating." "And yet you humans touch so freely," Vexia said, extending one slender hand toward him. "May I?" Marcus nodded, and she placed her palm against his. Her skin was warmer than human temperature, slightly textured like fine suede. A subtle tingling sensation spread up his arm, something biochemical, he realized, a method of communication more direct than words. "We are not so different," Vexia murmured, her voice taking on a melodic quality that the translation devices couldn't fully capture. "Both seeking connection, understanding." The moment was interrupted by a chime. Reluctantly, Vexia withdrew her hand. "My evening medications. A necessity in your planet's atmosphere." A silver-skinned attendant, not Krell, but similar, entered with a vial of iridescent liquid. Marcus noticed Vexia's skin darken to deep indigo as she accepted it, the Vexilian equivalent of a grimace. "Is it unpleasant?" he asked after the attendant departed. "Necessary," she repeated, drinking the substance. "Our biology isn't fully compatible with Earth. Small adjustments must be made." Later that night, a sound woke Marcus from sleep, a crash from Vexia's adjacent chambers. He hesitated only briefly before opening the connecting door that had remained unused until now. The ambassador lay on the floor, her skin cycling rapidly through colors in what appeared to be distress. Her 4 arms trembled as she tried unsuccessfully to reach a communication panel. "Vexia." Marcus rushed to her side, cradling her head. "What's happening? Should I call for help?" "No," she gasped, her voice weak. "No attendants. Not safe." "You need medical attention," Marcus insisted, reaching for the emergency call button. Vexia's hand shot out with surprising strength, stopping him. "Listen carefully, Marcus. I've been compromised. The medication, not what it should be." "Poisoned," he whispered, shock radiating through him. "But why?" "The negotiations," she managed, her breathing labored. "I'm here to prevent. A war faction doesn't want peace." Marcus's mind raced. The diplomatic corps had told Dominique nothing about negotiations, nothing about factions or conflicts. He'd been placed with Vexia under the pretense of cultural exchange, but now it seemed he'd been unwittingly drawn into something far more dangerous. "What can I do?" he asked, making his decision in an instant. "My personal quarters, hidden compartment." Vexia struggled to explain, her skin now ashen gray. "Behind the water feature. Detoxification compound." Marcus found the hidden panel exactly where she described, revealing a small medical kit with alien technology. Following her whispered instructions, he administered the antidote, a phosphorescent blue gel that he spread across the membrane at the base of her throat. "How long has this been happening?" he asked as color slowly returned to her skin. 3 doses now," Vexia admitted. "Each stronger than the last. Tonight would have been final." "Then we need to get you out of here," Marcus said firmly. "If someone among your staff is trying to kill you, this compound isn't safe." "Impossible," Vexia shook her head weakly. "Security protocols, tracking implants. I cannot leave without authorization." Marcus helped her to a sitting position, his mind working through options. "The implants, can they be removed?" "Yes, but painful and would trigger alarms." "Not if the systems are compromised first," Marcus said, a plan forming. His years growing up in the settlement housing had taught him more than just cultural tolerance. He'd learned how to circumvent security systems when necessary. "Do you trust me?" Vexia's skin rippled with gold, the color of hope, he'd learned. "I would not have shown you the antidote if I did not." Their eyes locked, her alien ones and his human, and something unspoken passed between them. A connection that transcended species, biology, and duty. "Then we leave tonight," Marcus said, squeezing her hand gently. "But first, I need to access the compound's communication array. Can you give me clearance?" Vexia reached for her official medallion, pressing her thumbprint into its surface. It glowed briefly, then projected a holographic access key. "This will grant you temporary diplomatic immunity within our systems." "But Marcus." Her voice grew serious. "Once we do this, there is no returning to your former life. You will be marked by both our governments as a person of interest." Marcus thought briefly of his apartment in the city, his work at the agency, his carefully constructed life of pleasant detachment. None of it seemed to matter when weighed against what was happening here, a conspiracy that could lead to interspecies war, and this remarkable being who had opened herself to him in a way she'd never done with another human. "Some things are worth the risk," he said, helping her to her feet. "Now, tell me everything I need to know about Vexilian security protocols and who we can trust." As Vexia began explaining, Marcus realized he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. He was no longer just an escort assigned to provide companionship. He had become something else entirely, a confidant, a protector, and perhaps the only human who could help prevent a diplomatic catastrophe. And as Vexia's hand remained in his, the biochemical connection between them pulsing like a second heartbeat, he knew he wouldn't have it any other way. The rain lashed against the windows of the dilapidated motel on the outskirts of New Chicago. Marcus pulled back the edge of the curtain, scanning the parking lot for any suspicious vehicles. 3 days had passed since their desperate escape from the diplomatic compound, and every moment since had been a masterclass in paranoia. "Anything?" Vexia asked, her voice weaker than he'd like. She sat cross-legged on the bed, all 4 arms engaged in applying a regenerative compound to the wounds where she'd removed her tracking implants. "Clear for now," Marcus replied, letting the curtain fall back into place. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." Her skin shifted to a muted copper tone, the Vexilian expression of determination through discomfort. "The compound is working, but slowly. Earth's atmospheric composition inhibits its effectiveness." Marcus crossed the room and sat beside her, gently taking one of her hands to examine the healing tissue. Their escape had been chaotic, alarms blaring as they fled through maintenance corridors, Vexia guiding him through the compound's layout while he disabled security protocols. They'd barely made it to the perimeter when guards had spotted them, forcing them to sprint across the manicured grounds toward the fence. It was there that Vexia had made a decision that still haunted him. Using a small device from her diplomatic kit, she'd extracted her tracking implants in a procedure that had left her trembling in pain but untraceable. The memory of her stifled cries made his chest tighten even now. "We need to contact your allies," Marcus said, applying another layer of the healing gel to her wounds. "We can't keep running like this forever." "Not yet," Vexia cautioned. "Communications could be monitored. We must verify who remained loyal before reaching out." A knock at the door sent them both into alert stillness. Marcus motioned for Vexia to move to the bathroom, the room's only viable hiding place, while he approached the door cautiously. "Room service," came a muffled voice. "We didn't order anything," Marcus called back, one hand on the stunner they'd taken from a guard during their escape. "Complimentary. Management's apology for the water pressure issues." Marcus glanced at Vexia, who had emerged from the bathroom. She shook her head slightly. Her species' hearing was more acute than human, and something in the voice had triggered her suspicion. "Leave it outside the door, please," Marcus said, gripping the stunner tighter. A pause. "Need signature, sir." "Policy." "Then slide the form under the door." Another pause, longer this time. Then footsteps retreating down the corridor. Marcus exhaled slowly, lowering the weapon. "They've found us," Vexia said simply. "We have perhaps 5 minutes before they return with reinforcements." They were moving immediately, gathering their meager supplies. Vexia winced as she pulled on the oversized human clothing they'd purchased from a thrift store, a hoodie and sweatpants that concealed her alien physiology from casual observation, though nothing could be done about her skin tone or extra arms without more specialized disguises. "We need to split up," Marcus suggested as they hurried down the back stairwell. "I'll create a diversion while you—" "No," Vexia cut him off, her skin flashing a deep crimson, her most intense emotional indicator. "Separation is tactically unsound." "It's the logical move," he argued. "They're looking for a pair, a human and an alien together." Vexia gripped his arm with her upper right hand, the one that seemed most sensitive. "There is something you must understand, Marcus. By helping me escape, you've formed a bond that my species considers significant." "What kind of bond?" he asked, though part of him already knew. The tingling sensation whenever they touched, the way he could increasingly sense her emotions even without seeing her skin colors, it wasn't just his imagination. "A biochemical resonance," she explained as they reached the exit door. "When I touched you that night in the garden, an exchange occurred. My species can form connections with compatible beings. It's rare, but not unprecedented with humans." Marcus processed this as they slipped out into the rain, making their way toward the service road behind the motel. "So we're what? Psychically linked now?" A flicker of amusement passed across her skin. "Nothing so mystical. Think of it as pheromonal synchronization. We're attuned to each other's biochemical signatures. It's why you can sense my distress, why I can feel your fear even when you mask it with bravado. And that's why we can't separate," Marcus realized. "The connection acts as a tracking mechanism. For now, yes. Until it either deepens or dissolves." Vexia pulled her hood lower as they approached a busy intersection. "It complicates matters, but also strengthens us." Marcus flagged down a passing autocab, helping Vexia inside before giving the machine instructions to take them to the industrial district. As the vehicle merged into traffic, he found himself studying her profile in the dim light. "This connection," he said carefully. "Is it always platonic?" Vexia turned to him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. "No," she admitted. "Often it becomes what you would call intimate. My species forms bonds first, then determines their nature afterward." The autocab swerved suddenly, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic. Marcus glimpsed the reason in the rearview display, a black government vehicle had appeared behind them, gaining rapidly. "They're using the bond to track us," Vexia realized, her skin paling to ashen gray. "I hadn't considered. How do we break it?" Marcus asked urgently. "We don't," she replied, her lower hands already working to override the autocab's navigation system. "But we can mask it temporarily." The cab lurched again as Vexia succeeded in taking manual control. She sent it careening down a narrow access road between warehouses while Marcus kept watch for pursuers. "There's a temporary solution," she continued, maneuvering the vehicle with surprising skill. "The biochemical connection can be overwhelmed by intense neurotransmitter activity." "Meaning?" "Strong emotions. Physical exertion. Pain." She paused, then added softly, "or pleasure." Their eyes met in the dim interior of the cab, understanding passing between them without words. The tension that had been building between them since that first touch in the garden crystallized into something tangible. "Is that why?" Marcus began. "Why the war faction assigned you to me?" "Perhaps. They may have hoped to use any connection formed against me. Against us both." The autocab screeched to a halt inside an abandoned loading dock. Vexia disabled its tracking beacon before they exited, moving quickly into the shadows of the cavernous building. "We have minutes before they triangulate our position," she said, checking the small scanner she'd taken from the compound. "We need to mask the connection now, or the next pursuit will find us." Marcus stepped closer, his heart racing with adrenaline and something else entirely. "And afterward? What happens to this bond?" Vexia's skin rippled with colors he hadn't seen before, deep violet intertwined with gold, creating patterns that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. "It would deepen," she whispered. "Become permanent, perhaps. My people don't enter such connections lightly." "Nor do I," Marcus said, reaching out to trace the patterned skin of her cheek with gentle fingers. "But some things are worth the risk." As security drones buzzed overhead and rainwater dripped through the decaying roof of the warehouse, Vexia's 4 arms encircled him, drawing him closer. Their foreheads touched, and the biochemical connection between them surged like an electric current. "Show me," she murmured, "how humans express connection." And as their pursers searched the rain-soaked city, Marcus and Vexia discovered that despite their biological differences, some languages of intimacy needed no translation. The underground bunker hummed with the sound of ancient air filtration systems. Located beneath an abandoned pre-contact military installation, it hadn't appeared on any official records for decades. The perfect place to hide, according to Roan, the grizzled ex-military operative who had answered Vexia's encrypted distress signal 2 days after their warehouse encounter. Marcus sat on a worn couch, watching Vexia converse with 3 other Vexillians across the room. Unlike her, they wore no human passing garments, their 4 arms moving in patterns that seemed part language, part ritual. Their skin tones shifted in synchronized waves, a communication method beyond human perception. "They don't trust you," Roan said, settling heavily beside Marcus. He passed over a steaming mug of something that smelled like coffee but probably wasn't. "Can't blame them. Humans haven't exactly proven trustworthy in intergalactic politics." "Says the human helping alien refugees," Marcus countered, accepting the drink. Roan snorted. "I owed Vexia's predecessor my life. Simple as that." He studied Marcus with narrowed eyes. "What's your excuse?" Marcus considered deflecting, but there seemed little point. The biochemical bond between him and Vexia had deepened significantly since their intimate encounter in the warehouse. Any Vexillian could likely sense it, and Roan had spent enough time among them to read the signs. "It started as an assignment," he admitted. "Evolved into something else." "A bond mate," Roan nodded. "Rare with humans. Even rarer for it to be reciprocated." He leaned forward. "You understand what that means, right?" It's not just some alien version of falling in love. It's a physiological dependency now. Permanent. Before Marcus could respond, Vexia approached, her skin a calm blue with golden undertones, her equilibrium restored by the presence of her own kind. My colleagues are prepared to share everything, she said, settling beside Marcus. Two of her hands found his, the familiar tingling sensation flowing between them, while her other arms remained poised in what he now recognized as a formal posture. But first, you must understand the full context of what's happening. Roan stood. I'll check the perimeter. You two talk. He collected a pulse rifle from near the door and disappeared up the stairs. When they were alone, Vexia's formal posture dissolved. She turned fully toward Marcus, all four hands now clasping his. What I'm about to tell you violates every diplomatic protocol my species holds sacred, she began, her voice low. But you've risked everything for me. You deserve the truth. Marcus nodded, sensing the weight of the moment through their connection. The official story is that I'm here as part of a cultural exchange mission, Vexia explained. The reality is far more complex. My species has been monitoring Earth for centuries, long before first contact was officially established. Why? Resources, initially. Your planet has elements rare in our sector. But as we studied humanity, factions developed among our leadership. Some saw Earth as a potential colony, others as a trading partner. Her skin darkened to deep indigo. The faction currently in power wishes to invade. They believe humans are too volatile, too unpredictable to negotiate with as equals. Marcus absorbed this, the implication sending a chill through him. And you? I lead the peace faction, she said simply. We believe coexistence is possible. That our species have more to offer each other as allies than as conquerors and conquered. The pieces fell into place in Marcus's mind. So your mission here was to establish a secret treaty with sympathetic Earth governments. A mutual defense pact that would make invasion too costly. Vexia's skin rippled with tension. The peace faction holds only a narrow majority in our council. If I fail, if I die, the balance shifts. And war becomes inevitable, Marcus finished grimly. Precisely. The poison was administered by agents working for General Zeth, the leader of the war faction. He arranged for your agency to send a companion he believed would be easily manipulated. Her skin flushed with a warm amber tone. He did not anticipate you would be different. Lucky coincidence, Marcus murmured. No, Vexia corrected gently. I requested someone with your specific profile. Xenolinguistics background, adaptive personality traits, ethical flexibility without moral compromise. The escort agency provided a list. I chose you. Marcus tried to process this revelation. You manipulated this situation from the beginning? I created an opportunity, she countered. The choice to help me was entirely yours. As was. She hesitated, what followed? The biochemical bond between them surged with her sincerity, making it impossible to doubt her. Marcus could literally feel her emotional state through their connection, the mixture of strategic calculation and genuine affection that had guided her decisions. The bond between us, he said carefully. Was that part of your plan too? Vexia's skin lightened to a vulnerable shade of lavender. No. Such connections cannot be forced or predicted. They simply happen. Or don't. Her multifaceted eyes studied his face. Does it matter if I hoped for it? Before Marcus could answer, the bunker door burst open. Roan staggered in, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. They found us, he gasped, collapsing against the wall. Government strike team. Both species. They're working together. The three Vexillian advisors moved immediately to defensive positions, retrieving weapons from hidden compartments in the walls. One rushed to Roan, applying a glowing substance to his wound. How? Vexia demanded, pulling Marcus toward the rear exit. This location was secure. Traitor, Roan managed through gritted teeth. In your inner circle. Wearing human face. Marcus felt Vexia freeze beside him. You mean? Surgical alteration, Roan confirmed. One of your people disguised as human, working with both governments. Been tracking you through. He gestured vaguely at Marcus, the bond. Impossible, Vexia protested. The bond can only be traced by those genetically connected to me. Family or, she stopped abruptly, her skin draining to ash gray. No. What? Marcus asked, alarmed by her reaction. General Zeth, she whispered. He's my clutch brother. Same genetic source. Her eyes widened with horrified realization. He can sense our connection because we share biological markers. A thunderous explosion rocked the bunker's entrance. Through the dust, Marcus could see armored figures descending the stairs. We have to reach the Treaty Council, Vexia said urgently. It's our only chance now. The tunnels, Roan directed, waving toward the back of the bunker. They lead to the old subway system. 2 miles north, there's an access point near the United Earth Embassy. The Vexillian advisors moved to engage the incoming forces, buying them time. Vexia hesitated, clearly torn between staying with her people and completing her mission. They'll kill you, Marcus said, tugging her toward the escape route. Your death serves the war faction. You know this. She relented, following him into the narrow maintenance tunnel. As the sounds of energy weapons and shouted commands faded behind them, Vexia activated a small communication device embedded in her wrist. Contingency Protocol Epsilon, she spoke into it. Authorization Vexia, Prime 9872. Council session required immediately. They moved as quickly as possible through the cramped tunnels, the only light coming from the bioluminescent patches on Vexia's skin that had intensified with her stress. If we reach the embassy, Marcus asked between breaths, what then? I present evidence of the conspiracy. Force a vote before the combined councils. Her voice hardened. And I expose my brother as the architect of potential genocide. Marcus caught the genuine pain in her tone. Despite everything, Zeth was still her family. I'm sorry, he said simply. Vexia's hand found his in the darkness, the biochemical connection between them providing mutual comfort. Some bonds are chosen, she said quietly. Others are imposed by birth. The chosen ones are often stronger. As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the city, Marcus understood they were racing not just for their lives, but for the future of 2 species. And at the center of this interstellar crisis was something neither government had anticipated, the profound connection between 2 beings who had every reason to remain strangers, yet had chosen to become something much more. Whatever happened at the embassy, whatever the councils decided, that connection had already changed everything. For both of them. For everyone. The United Earth Embassy's Emergency Council chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives from 17 nations and 5 alien species had assembled on less than an hour's notice, their faces showing varying degrees of confusion, alarm, and suspicion. At the center of the circular room stood Marcus and Vexia, both still bearing the marks of their desperate flight through the city's underground tunnels. This emergency session is highly irregular, declared Counselor Harrington, Earth's senior diplomatic officer. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, highlighting the deep frown lines on her forehead. Ambassador Vexia, you disappeared from your compound 6 days ago, breaking numerous diplomatic protocols. Now you return making accusations of conspiracy against your own government. Vexia stood tall, her forearms positioned in what Marcus now recognized as her most formal diplomatic stance. Her skin had settled into a steady royal blue, the color of absolute conviction. "I do not make these claims lightly, Counselor," she replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "As the evidence will show, elements within both our governments have been collaborating to sabotage peace efforts." A murmur rippled through the assembled dignitaries. Marcus scanned the room, noting security personnel at every exit, some human, some alien, all heavily armed. If this went poorly, escape would be impossible. "And who is this?" asked a Vexillian representative, gesturing to Marcus with obvious disdain. "A human escort, I'm told. Hardly a credible witness in matters of interstellar diplomacy." Before Vexia could respond, the chamber doors slid open. A figure strode in, flanked by guards wearing the distinctive insignia of the Vexillian High Command. Tall and imposing, with skin a deep emerald green that conveyed supreme authority in their culture, the newcomer fixed his multifaceted eyes on Vexia. "General Zeth," Vexia acknowledged, her voice barely hiding her tension. "How convenient that my clutch brother arrives just as I prepare to expose his treason." "Sister," Zeth replied, the translation device at his throat rendering his voice in a cold monotone. "Your diplomatic immunity remains in effect, despite your erratic behavior." He turned to the council. "My sister's mind has been compromised by extended exposure to Earth's atmosphere. A known side effect, unfortunately." "These paranoid delusions." "Are not delusions," interrupted another voice. Roan limped into the chamber, his shoulder bandaged but his expression fierce. Behind him followed two more figures, one human, one Vexillian, both in medical uniforms. "We have proof." The medical officers stepped forward, placing a containment unit on the central display table. Inside floated 3 vials of the iridescent liquid, the medication that had been slowly poisoning Vexia. Analyzed by independent laboratories, the human doctor explained, activating a holographic display that showed molecular structures and toxicology reports. A sophisticated neurotoxin designed specifically for Vexillian biology. Slow-acting, targeting cognitive functions first to create confusion and paranoia before causing physical deterioration. "This proves nothing about my involvement," General Zeth countered smoothly. "Security breaches happen. Assassins target diplomats regularly." "Indeed they do," Vexia agreed. She tapped a sequence into her wrist device, and a new hologram appeared above the council table, security footage showing Zeth himself handing the vials to Vexia's attendants, followed by communications logs between him and several human officials not present in the chamber. The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew across species lines as the implications became clear. Marcus watched as alliances formed and shattered in real time, years of diplomatic work unraveling in moments. Amid the uproar, Zeth moved with startling speed toward Vexia, something metallic glinting in his lower right hand. Marcus reacted instinctively, driven by the biochemical bond that alerted him to the danger even before his eyes registered it. He lunged forward, intercepting Zeth's arm before the concealed weapon could reach Vexia. The two grappled briefly before security personnel swarmed them, separating the combatants. Marcus found himself restrained by 2 human guards while Zeth was surrounded by a mixture of species. "Sedate him," Zeth commanded. "This human is clearly unstable." "Actually," came Counselor Harrington's voice, cutting through the confusion, "I believe what we just witnessed was an assassination attempt." She nodded to the security chief. "Search General Zeth." The search revealed a neural disruptor, a weapon designed to sever the connection between brain and body, causing immediate death while leaving no external marks. Deadly, untraceable, and conclusive proof of Zeth's intentions. As Zeth was led away in restraints, his skin had darkened to the Vexillian equivalent of rage. He paused beside Vexia, speaking in their native language, sounds too complex for the translation devices to capture. Vexia responded in the same tongue, her skin rippling with patterns of both regret and determination. Whatever passed between them seemed final, the severing of a familial bond as profound as the one Marcus and Vexia had formed. The emergency session stretched into the night as testimonies were given, evidence examined, and diplomatic protocols hastily rewritten. Marcus found himself questioned repeatedly about his role, his relationship with Vexia, the extent of his knowledge about the conspiracy. Finally, as dawn broke over the embassy's reinforced windows, an interim agreement was reached. A joint Earth-Vexilian commission would investigate the extent of the conspiracy. Zeth and his human co-conspirators would face trial. And most importantly, the peace treaty Vexia had been working toward would be fast-tracked, with both governments eager to distance themselves from the exposed war factions. As the council chamber finally emptied, Marcus and Vexia found themselves alone for the first time in hours. She approached him slowly, her exhaustion evident in the muted tones of her skin. "You saved my life," she said simply. Returning the favor, he replied with a tired smile. "You saved mine the moment you let me help you escape." Vexia extended all four hands toward him, a gesture of complete openness in her culture. "The bond between us, it will be complicated now. My position, your status. When has anything about us been simple?" Marcus took her hands, the familiar warmth of their connection flowing between them. "What happens next? Politically? Months of negotiations, investigations, restructuring of both our diplomatic corps." Her skin shifted to a hopeful gold. "Personally? That depends on what you want, Marcus. I was hired to provide companionship," he said thoughtfully. "To help someone understand humanity better. The contract was for 2 weeks. The official assignment has certainly exceeded its parameters." "True," Marcus agreed. "But I find myself reluctant to consider it complete." Counselor Harrington re-entered the chamber, pausing when she saw them. Her expression softened slightly at the sight of their joined hands. "Ambassador Vexia," she called. "The Vexilian High Council is requesting your immediate return to lead the peace delegation. They've approved your request for a human cultural attaché to join your permanent staff." She looked pointedly at Marcus. "Someone with specialized knowledge of both our worlds." After Harrington departed, Vexia turned back to Marcus. "I may have taken some liberties in recommending you for a position," she admitted. During one of the brief recesses. From escort to diplomat, Marcus mused. "Quite a career change. Is that a yes?" Instead of answering with words, Marcus drew her closer. Their foreheads touched, the most intimate gesture in Vexilian culture, and their biochemical bond flared with warmth and possibility. "Some protocols," he murmured, "are meant to be broken." Vexia's skin illuminated with patterns more complex and beautiful than any he'd seen before, the Vexilian expression of profound joy. As the morning light strengthened around them, casting rainbow reflections through her translucent outer membrane, Marcus realized they had created something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds that existed not in treaties or trade agreements, but in the connection between two beings who had chosen each other despite every reason not to. "The assignment may be over," he said softly, "but we're just beginning." Outside the embassy windows, the city was awakening, unaware that the threat of interstellar war had been averted overnight. Citizens of both species moved through the streets, separate but parallel, not yet truly integrated. But as Marcus and Vexia stood together in the empty council chamber, their silhouettes merging in the morning light, they embodied a future where such boundaries might one day dissolve completely. Not through politics or power, but through something far more revolutionary: understanding, connection, and the courage to reach across differences that once seemed insurmountable. The protocols that had brought them together had been shattered beyond repair. What would take their place was something new, uncharted, and infinitely more promising. Something beyond protocol.